Okay, so welcome everyone. I'm filling in for Lisa today, who's on an airplane. I'm Amy Kosoff, for those of you who don't know me. I've known Lisa for years and years, and I've been involved in 31st Street since the very first meeting in her house in very early 2017, in the days when we could all fit into Lisa's living room and Zooming was something you did when you were late to work. Those were the days, and these are the days now. So from 2016 to 2021, 31st Street really helped me maintain my sanity. I don't know what I would have done without it. And since Biden has been in office, the group has just continued to inspire me and give me hope for the future. And we do have a great meeting in store for you today with presentations from Susanna Gibson and Kim Adams, two of our Virginia Slate candidates. So prior to 2017, I would occasionally start sentences with, I'm 100% certain that, whatever it was, and that seemed normal. And one particular instance when I used that quite a bit was when I would say to people, and for some reason, lots of people asked me, though I'm no expert, I would say, I'm 100% sure that Donald Trump will never become president. And now I never say that I'm 100% sure of anything. But 1 week ago, I would have said that I was 99% sure that I would never, in front of a group of 31st Street democracy warriors, quote Marjorie Taylor Greene, but I'm about to do that. Many or even all of you might have heard what she said at the Turning Points USA conference, but I really believe that it bears mentioning over and over. So MTG compared President Biden's Build Back Better plan to LBJ's Great Society programs, which invested in, and here I'm quoting her, education, medical care, urban problems, rural poverty, transportation, Medicare, Medicaid, food stamps, welfare, the Office of Economic Opportunity, and big labor and big unions. End quote for a second. Then she noted that under Biden, the US has, I'm again quoting, made the largest public investment in social infrastructure and environmental programs that is actually finishing what FDR started, that LBJ expanded on, and Joe Biden is attempting to complete. End quotes. So the White House Twitter account immediately retweeted it and wrote, caught us, President Biden is working to make life easier for hardworking families. And then they quickly put out a fantastic ad, which if any of you have not seen, you should. I bring this quote up because I truly believe that this is the message that we have to spread all over the country, but particularly right now in Virginia. On the night of the Virginia election in November, we need to have won majorities in both houses. There just is not any other possibility. We know it can happen, and it's already happening in states with governors like Glenn Youngkin. We were talking about this at the meeting of new members. He's already, trying to attacking LGBT kids and trans kids and doing all kinds of things that are really bad. And he is really hoping for a trifecta, and he's not going to get it. And all of us here will play a role in his disappointment on election night. Our message is really clear. As Simon Rosenberg says, things do get better with Democrats in office, and we have to just go out there and bring out that message loud and clear, because the Democratic Party isn't always that great at doing that. And people have to realize how much better things are, even if it hasn't quite gotten to them yet, because I think there are people who are still suffering. So I think when you hear shortly from our two candidates, you'll be again inspired to get out there and canvass, raise money, write postcards, whatever your preferred activity is. We don't care. We don't care if you give $5 or $5,000. We don't care if you write 5 postcards or 20. We just want you to be with us and come with us and do the work that needs to be done. And I'm so grateful to be a part of this organization, and all of you coming on a hot summer July day to be here inspire me and move me. And so I just thank all of you. And I will turn it over to Jim to talk a bit about Virginia and the state of play.
Great. Thanks, Amy. I'm just going to go ahead and move to my slides. without further ado, can people see that okay and hear me also? Great, okay. So picking up, oops. On the first, most of you are here to talk about Virginia. That's where the action is, but we're looking forward to next year. And they do allow me to talk about national things that I observe as well, which I think help us somewhat. So I have a few points to make. And one of these, of course, is what Amy was alluding to, is that even though the economy is actually in very good shape, and we don't need to go into it particularly, there's still this nagging perception that the economy is bad, and it weighs heavily on Biden. And I think it's a little bit almost like post-traumatic stress disorder. Some of it is people don't know, but also they just kind of keeping in, and also the negative news that they hear. So we'll talk about that a bit. Turnout is king. So we have persuasion and turnout, they're both important, but I'm going to try to make the argument that turnout is really tantamount, I suppose. And then we're getting some new information about the importance of the youth vote, and I'll present a little bit of data on that. And of course, we knew it was important, but it is definitely trending our way. The last thing relates to something Mary was kind of saying earlier, which is that my advice is tune out the horse race. You know, tune out DeSantis and RFK Jr. And so, I mean, obviously it's sort of interesting, but it's not really going to make any difference that what we following that. Okay, so on Biden's approval, you know, I like to show a fair amount of data. This is a recent survey. Actually, his overall approval is a little worse in this. But always the economic one lags a lot, and oftentimes more than even in this particular survey, even though he does better in a lot of other kinds of things. But notice that it's up 3% from April, that same data set. Another piece of information is here we have, again, we got a lot of pessimism. Just 3 in 10 people think the economy is doing well, but it's ticking up if you look over here. So hopefully the trend is our friend. Likewise, if you look at people's confidence about their own personal finances, and you kind of look at the net, confident and uneasy, we're definitely moving in the positive direction overall, and in a number of groups that this uneasiness is subsiding a bit. And then lastly, consumer sentiment took a nice pop this last month, I guess it was. University of Michigan been doing this survey. So all these things are moving in our direction. I mean, I think Biden's disapproval relates more than anything else just to how people are feeling. Obviously, there is this Republican narrative about inflation and how it's about spending money on unworthy people. But I think that we have our own arguments to counter that, and I think we will. So on the point of turnout is king. So there are now a couple of very good analyses, one by Pew and one by an organization called Catalyst, on what happened in 2022. Pew does very solid interviews of voters. And the key point is here is that they found this pretty significant finding, a very significant finding, that there's very little movement among voters who are consistent voters. So again, we have this thing about persuasion. We're trying to persuade people to vote one way or the other, That's about where 90% of the money is spent, maybe not that much. And some of that's worthwhile depending on how it's done. But in the end, if you look down at the bottom here, very few people changed. These are people that actually voted, and they voted Democratic, and they voted either Republican or Democratic 4 years later. So among that particular very important group of voters, no difference. So. On the other hand, and I will grant you that this is a bit subtle to figure out, and this is some different data set. If you look, these are national data. And if you look, Clinton won the national vote. He only won it by a little bit. Biden won it by more. But you notice Trump actually got about as good a turnout proportionally now these are voters that Catalyst feels are Democratic voters or are Republican voters. But basically the takeaway is that we're leaving a lot of Democratic voters on the table, even in a presidential election. And it's even a lot more in these other elections that we think are so important. Okay, for the young voters, the importance of young voters depends upon three things. It depends upon registration. It depends upon turnout among those that are registered. And then it depends upon vote share among those that vote. So you kind of need to work on all three of those. And I've got some data on two of them. So basically, first of all, on turnout, this is some data from Celinda Lake, who's a very well-respected pollster. It was in the Washington Post about 4 or 5 days ago. Basic point is that among these younger voters in both presidential and in midterm elections, we are getting a higher proportion than we have previously. So that's turnout. But then also in terms of vote share, and I grant you, this is all a little more subtle as well. This is a Catalyst analysis of blue states, purple states, red states. And it's only looking at people who voted for the first time after 2016. But notice that the thing that was most helpful for us, and this is not in terms of numbers of votes, but proportionally in terms of vote share, were these young voters. So they're going with us and we need to keep at it. And again, this is one of Simon Rosenberg's key points as well. So shifting to the main thing that we want to talk about, which is Virginia. And as Amy mentioned, more than mentioned, she made a good case for the fact, this guy Youngkin, he's MAGA. I mean, he's an opportunist, but he's like, and of course, you try to be MAGA and non-MAGA at the same time, which he's able to pull off better than most people, actually. And I don't want to go through each one of these things, but it's important for abortion restrictions, particularly. And obviously, we want, a good election and a good life for people in Virginia, but this has national implications as well. Virginia may be the last Southern state that's going to have, free access to abortion. At this way it's looking, but even things like greenhouse gases, he's actually been a destructive force as well. But he's raising a lot of money. He raised almost $6 million between April and June of this year. A lot of it from big mega donors. This is going into his PAC. Now, hopefully he's not going to spend all this money on Virginia. I'm pretty sure he isn't, because he's waiting in the wings. He wants to run for president. He's going to wait and see what happens. So, but that's formidable. That's why we need to be raising money to try to counter that. And the thing is, we do have a number of things really going for us in Virginia. And I will say that I really do feel it's about turnout. I've tried to make that point nationally, but particularly in this kind of election, my guess is the turnout is going to be about 40%. And the more we can turn out our people, we can win just by turning out our strong supporters. Doesn't mean we don't do persuasion, but it should be a significant part of what we're doing, the lion's share. So as we'll hear later, we have great candidates. And some of their candidates are not so great. I think in general, we have a really great set of candidates in what we call the sweet spot of campaigns. We actually have, in my opinion, a well-organized statewide coordinated campaign. It's far from perfect, but it is operating across a lot of the key races, or maybe all the key races. And it's getting us out of this sort of silo. So the coordinated campaign is providing key staff to campaigns for campaign managers and for field directors and for field staff as well. And you get a lot of good economies of scale that way and so forth. We are actually at this point, we're doing better in most races, not all races, at the candidate level. So Youngkin has yet, I think, to allocate a lot of that money. We have abortion. It's our biggest issue, in my opinion. I mean, obviously, there are many other issues, and there's local issues and so forth. But in my canvassing already, I'm finding that abortion is really very helpful for us. And then we have not an army, but a good set of volunteer canvassers, which they don't have. They can hire canvassers, but they don't nearly have the canvasser operation that we do. And just want to make the point that we're going to have our first canvass on August 5th. So I hope people will sign up for that. We'll hear more about that from Joanne. So here's our slate. 9 strong. And we've really focused in on the races that we think are going to make the most difference here. Now, you may recall that we actually had I'm trying to remember. We had 10. Maybe anyway. We got new canvassing. We got new fundraising data, and we actually have found that three of the candidates that we had were doing quite well, and so we have moved them on. We have 8 now. We had 10. We've dropped 3, and we've added 1. We've added Karen Jenkins here. Among other things, because her opponent is an election denier, but also she's in a seat where we think she can win. And if she doesn't win this time, she might win in 2 years. But notably, both Susanna and Kim were in very tight primaries. And so once their primary is over, their funds were depleted. We've tried to steer additional money toward them to some extent successfully, and I think they're both terrific candidates, and we're going to hear from them. We're currently at 179,000 guys, and so thanks so very, very much for our goal of 200,000 of early money. And I do think, that amount of money per candidate actually does move the needle and sort of help them out and allows them to do more canvassing themselves rather than phoning for our money. So with that, we're going to turn it over to our 2 candidates, Susanna Gibson and Kim Adams. And I'm just going to stop sharing and turn it over to Susanna. Over to you.
Well, first of all, let me say thank you guys for being here and for everything that you have done. Per Jim's point, we had a competitive primary, and so did Kim Pope Adams, who Kim and I are emerged sisters, and I could not be more excited to hopefully serve in the General Assembly with her. She is fantastic, and as y'all will hear in a little bit, but we are both in competitive primaries and depleted at least my funding and kind of war chest, and I'm just grateful for everyone here who has helped me start building that back up. It makes a big difference. I don't think most of you know who I am, but I am a nurse practitioner who is running for the House of Delegates in the new 57th district. This is a district that previously had been very heavily gerrymandered Republican, but with redistricting, it actually moved 20 points Democratic. I mean, that's a huge jump. And it is a 50-50 district, probably the tightest in the state. In the midterms, there was a 79 vote difference out of 44,000 votes, a 79 vote difference between the Democrats and the Republicans. So it is going to take, yes, getting out the vote turnout is hugely important. And canvassing is hugely important as well. That's where I've been all morning, which is why I look like a drowned rat. But and we are focusing on those persuasion doors, me in particular. So, but as a nurse practitioner, I mean, quite frankly, abortion is the #1 issue I've been hearing on the doors, and that's why I'm running. I had thought about it for a long time. My mother was Rosalind Carter's personal assistant during the primaries and traveled the country with the Carters and then stayed on. She was chairman of the Charlottesville City School Board forever when I was growing up. I've grown up with strong women in politics and dabbled with the idea of running before, but it's terrifying to put yourself out there in this way for the first time. But when the Dobbs decision came out last summer, I decided that I was no longer afraid. I was just infuriated. Angry is not even the right word to express that. And that if the people we elect to the General Assembly are going to be the people that get to determine those rights for people here in Virginia, then I will do anything and everything to be in there and be one of those people as a healthcare provider. So, funding. You guys, again, as I mentioned before, have been incredible for funding. The Republicans are aggressively going after this district already, and they've already been releasing attack ads against Kim and myself and a few others, predominantly the people that you guys are supporting, actually. But my district is unique in that the Family Foundation is spending a lot of money and time in my district. And then there's a senator over in Williamsburg, Monty Mason. And it seems to be the two of us that they are targeting. They've put out 2 pieces of mail already and knocked my neighborhood. If you're not familiar with the Family Foundation, I had to triple or quadruple check that they are not considered a hate group. They are extremely far-right Christian, anti-LGBTQ, anti-abortion, life begins at conception, wanting to ban contraception. They're as far right as they can be, and my Republican opponent is not only endorsed by them, but they are focusing on this district for the House of Delegates. And this district is considered one of the very few majority makers or breakers in the House, and is hugely important, especially now that they've made abundantly clear, they're not just conservative, they're not just Republican. These are people that will ban abortion at every single level that they can if they win this seat. So I can win it. It's a 50-50, but it needs help and support. Door knocking, canvassing, phone banking, postcard writing, and of course funding so that I can reach people in the district and not just reach them, but really take control of the narrative here and push back. So, but again, I just appreciate you guys. I know that time is short and I will let Kim speak now, but and we'll have Q&A later. But again, just thank you for taking the time and for caring and for the support. Every single vote matters, and every single person and every single kind of support that you guys are giving matters. So I just thank you.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I just love following Susanna. As she said, we are Merge Sisters. We went through an intensive, six-month candidate training together. And I'll tell you on a personal note, Susanna and I could not be more different in some respects, but our passion is so alike, and it definitely showed just now by listening to you. So thank you, Susanna. And also thank you to everyone here. As she mentioned, also being in a primary as competitive as ours, it really does deplete all of your funds. I mean, you really want to leave it all out on the field, and we both did. And because of that, we're able to be here today, speaking to you as the Democratic nominee for our respective districts. So it was not money wasted by any means. It was definitely for purpose. And we know that with your continued support, we can continue to spend those funds for the right reasons, for the purposeful reasons. Again, I am Kimberly Pope Adams. I am the Democratic nominee for House District 82. On a personal note, I am a single mother. I am a rural Democrat, and I say that because we have lost a share of rural Democratic votes in my district, and I believe this is an opportunity. My district covers the city of Petersburg, along with Dinwiddie County, Prince George County, and Surrey County. And we are historically blue. we had been blue for as long as I can remember, for decades. This district had been blue. And in 2021, we lost this seat to the Republicans by 512 votes. And when that happened, I will be honest with you, Glenn Youngkin started to express he started to express interest in this district. It is very ingenuine. And those of us who have lived here long enough know that it is not a genuine interest in our district. However, he has managed to repackage programs and funding that was already going to happen, things that were already affiliated with Build Back Better, things that we know were going to happen for our community. But Glenn Youngkin has found a way to rebrand them, to market them in a way that has certain voters in my district believing that it was his effort. And I believe that what is so important for us now, as you said, persuasion, turnout, but making sure we inform the voter as to what Democrats are doing for us. And given the demographics of my district, I have one locality where the median household income is $43,000 household income. So I know that there are people who have the very everyday struggles that are the reason we are Democrats and the reason we fight for the things we fight for. And it is so disheartening, and it's really heartbreaking to see how Republicans wordsmith and how they make it seem as though they are for a particular type of person when we know they don't care. They don't care. And it is our responsibility as responsible Democrats to make sure when we knock on doors and when we postcard and when we phone bank, we let people know we are the Democratic Party because we are the better party. We are the party that cares about everyone. We are the party who makes sure that people's needs are met. I grew up in a single parent household, and I know what it's like to grow up with one income. And I know what it's like to grow up and need help. And without the Democratic Party, I don't know if I would be where I am today. So again, I've told you about my district. This is also, as I said, a toss-up based on 2022 congressional election. The Democrats won by 500 votes. So we lost the House of Delegates seat in 21 by 500, and the late Congressman Donald McKeechick won by 500 votes. So there's been a swing. And I see a question here. I'm sorry. I see a question to me. What particular issues do you see motivating rural voters to vote Democratic? Thank you for that. It's kitchen table issues. It's kitchen table issues. I am very pro-union. My daddy was a union worker. And when I'm on doors in the rural localities and I remind them why we are Democrats, I remind them about paid time off. I remind them about a living wage. I remind them about the things that aren't left or right, red or blue. It's just right or wrong. People deserve to be, if you work a 40-hour week, you should be able to live. You should be able to have a place to live and a roof over your head. I have people in my rural locality that live long-term in campgrounds. That's really happening in my district. I have people who live long-term in hotels in my district. And these are not people who are unemployed. These are people who get up and go to work every day, but cannot afford to live in a single family home, cannot afford to live in an apartment. So when I'm talking to rural voters, there are rural voters who are very fired up about abortion and very fired up about a woman's right to choose. But what I have discovered on my rural doors is that people want to know that they can live comfortably. They want to know they can have a roof over their head. They want to know that if they get sick and can't go to work, then it won't be the difference between being able to pay their bills. Paid time off is a very big topic in my district. And that is something that I continue to hear on doors. And I won't go quite, I guess, until the Q&A, because I do see that there's something in between myself and the Q&A. So I'll pause for now. But again, I thank you all so much for all of the support you have given and continue to give. It is not lost on us. And I think I speak for Susanna and I both. It is not lost on us the contributions that you have made to us early on. We've heard stories about candidates who receive money so close to election day that it's hard to spend it the way you would like. But what you all are doing allows us to make the smart investment in our campaign, and I could not be more appreciative. So again, I thank you, and I'll allow the next step on the program.
Okay, Mary, I believe you are up with the ask.
So my name's Mary Shelton Pence. I'm a part of the membership team. And my job here today is to do the ask. So please get ready for an ask. In the context of writing about the hard-won rights which the Supreme Court stripped from us this June and the previous June, Rebecca Sonnet, who writes for The Guardian, said the following: "History shows us that when we come together with ferocious commitment to a shared goal, we can be more powerful than institutions and governments. The right would have us feel defeated and powerless, but we can feel devastated and still find our power. This is not a time to quit. This is a time to fight." So I'm speaking to you from my own personal space right now, my heart and my head, and I suppose my soul. From my perspective, it has been the time to fight ever since that guy with the orange hair was elected in 2016. And he, of course, is not the sole problem, but he has unleashed the dark part of Americans all across this country. Right now, the place for us to fight is Virginia, both for our neighbors and as the opening salvo in the fight for the House and the Senate and the White House in 2024. I am asking you to make a ferocious commitment to our shared goals in this perilous time in American history, to support these two amazing and committed candidates, Susanna and Kim, as well as the other carefully researched and selected candidates for the Virginia legislature. And I'm asking you to stretch, whatever that is for you, to contribute for the first time or to contribute again. For my husband, Dan, who's sitting right over here, and myself, stretching has meant contributing $2,000 and then another $1,000 for this slate. And so you should ask, well, why are you stretching? And my answer is because we can, because we know these are the right candidates for this moment, and because we have a ferocious commitment to a shared goal, saving our democracy. So my ask is this, that you join us in tapping into your ferocious commitment by contributing or contributing again to these Virginia legislature candidates. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mary. That was just wonderful as always. And already I'm seeing people chiming in the chat with their donations, and you can find the link to add your donation if you would like right there in the chat. So I am Aaron Hamburger. For those of you who don't know, I do membership here at 31st Street Swing Left, and I also do curating of questions for our Q&A sessions with our guest speakers, including our wonderful guests today, Susanna and Kim. So we have a few questions already in the chat. I will lob those out. And if you have other ones, please feel free to add those. And Jim just noted, we have raised over $6,000 already today. So thank you so very much. 31st Street always comes through. It's just amazing. So first question, Susanna, I have for you. The questioner says, I think I heard you once say you have always outworked everyone else and would outwork your opponent. Can you elaborate?
Yes.
And I think you have somebody with you here.
She has the best timing in the world, let me tell you. Hold on. Give me 2 seconds. Nope. Okay. Oh, yes, I see. Okay. Give me 5 seconds. You want to sit?
Our candidates are real.
Well, that just exemplifies that. One thing I will always say is that, and I continue to stand by it, I will put my work ethic up against anyone's and my belief in myself. And it's funny, we were on a Zoom maybe about a month ago and they said, what's your superpower? And I said, my work ethic. And I use the example of me running. So I have always struggled with my weight since I was a young girl, probably about this one's age, and remember not being able to even do the mile run in the presidential fitness test. And after I became a mother, I decided that I wanted to be able to run. And I was incredibly slow. I couldn't even run a 10-minute mile, but my goal was to become the fastest woman in Richmond. And now, while I am certainly not the fastest woman in Richmond, I worked and I worked. I ran when people would walk at Orange Theory. When they said to walk and take a rest, I refused to do that. And I continued to run to get my endurance up. And I am proud to say that I'm faster now than almost everyone in everyone in Richmond. I can now run a sub 6-minute mile, which is the analogy that I use for this. Okay. So when I started, I get the question a lot, have you ever held office before? Have you ever done this before? And I say no, but I will continue to work and work and work until I become the best. And whether that is with fundraising, whether that is with door knocking, whether that is with talking to the persuasion voters, I will continue to outwork everyone and I will continue to run when people walk because that's what it demands.
Great. Oh, I love that personal story. Okay, I have a question for both of you, and maybe Kim, you can start, and then Susanna can chime in after. So with the additional money that we are hoping to raise for you, what additional outreach efforts or things could you use that for to help your campaign? Kim, do you want to first?
Sure. Well, as I said, the timing is phenomenal because it allows us to be proactive and not necessarily be reactive in the way that we spend the funds, which is always important for me. As Susanna said earlier, we are both getting attack ads already from the Republican side. Ironically, we have the exact same attack ad, just one has my photo and then the other one has her photo, but apparently we are both. What is it, Susanna? We are too extreme for Virginia, a nurse and an accountant. Doesn't get more extreme than a nurse and an accountant. but yes, but for us, and I know for me personally, having these funds early on, like I said, allows us to make those strategic decisions because direct voter contact is everything. And I learned that in the primary and just for my own personal story about the primary for me, I was out fundraised 2-1 in my primary. I was outspent in my primary 2-1. My primary opponent sent 9 pieces of mail. I sent 3. But what I kept doing was knocking on doors because that didn't cost a thing. And I knew that if I could just have that moment, if I could have that one-on-one moment with a voter, I knew that I could explain to them and articulate to them why I was the better candidate. So despite being a single mother with a full-time job, I still managed to personally knock 4,000 doors in my race. And I know with this support, allowing me to find that balance between call time and door knocking, it just allows me to have that much more time on doors, that much more time meeting voters. And for me, these funds this early on just allows me to keep the momentum going from the primary so that people don't forget who I am, and they can continue to hear my story, continue to hear why we need to flip this seat back to blue. So for me, this early money just means continuing to have the types of conversations with voters that they deserve.
Mhm.
Great. Susanna?
Allows us to have the staff that we need to really be able to run strong campaigns. It allows us to have our campaign managers. It allows us to have our finance directors to help with the fundraising. But to Kim's point, with the attack ads, we are being really strategic in terms of when we respond and how we respond. And we are going to have to respond at some point, but not right now. We are holding on to our money and waiting until the opportune time. So we are being very smart with our money, but it helps us not let the Republicans control the narrative, which is what they're trying to do. They're trying to paint us as extreme. They are trying to paint us as having held office before and taken certain votes, which we all know is not true. They are texting and making up websites and all of these things, none of which we are. But the early money, it does allow us to be able to sit back and not be reactive. It allows us to be strategic in how and when. It gives us that flexibility to really do what's best for our campaign so that we can actually win. So
Great. Okay, we have a couple of questions about specific issues. Two that have come up are abortion and climate change. And the question is, how is that playing a role in your campaigns? Is that something you're highlighting? Is it something that helps you? So again, maybe, Suzanne, do you want to go first this time, and then Kim?
yeah, I mean, abortion is number one when I'm knocking doors, and it's motivating to a lot of Republican women as well. And that's good because I need them in a 50-50. Right. And I think there are a lot of women that are quite enthused that a healthcare provider who is a woman is running for office and running loudly and proudly on abortion. When I got into this, I made it my number one issue because it is. I've always been a passionate reproductive rights advocate. I went back to school after already getting a bachelor's degree in religious histories from UVA. I went back to school after volunteering at the UVA Teen Health Center, which we largely did contraception, family planning, and some first trimester OB work. I mean, it's always been a passion. And in the district, it is a motivating issue and it is a winning issue, which happens to be great because it is my number one issue regardless. In terms of climate change, I hear climate change a lot and speak to voters. I was just talking to someone today. I was asking them on the door, what's your major issues? And this is someone who's a Republican, worked for Dominion Energy here in Virginia for a long time. And he said, energy. I'm concerned about the clean energy mandates that are coming down. And we had a really wonderful discussion about diversifying Virginia's portfolio when it comes to energy and what will actually work here in Virginia. I am lucky in that my brother is a geologist who specializes in carbon sequestration. So I actually know a fair amount about decarbonization and what will work for Virginia's topography in particular. And we've been able to have wonderful discussions. My opponent really isn't saying anything about climate change. He is talking about critical race theory in education, and he is talking about abortion, and that Democrats want to allow abortion up until the time of birth, and that we don't support protections for infants born alive during botched abortions. So really, he's focusing on not actual issues that would help Virginians, but they're focusing just on those, turn their base out complete lies. But yeah, climate change is huge, but I would say abortion and guns are probably the two main issues here in the district.
Interesting. Kim, how about for you?
Yeah. All right. Thank you. So for me, the conversation about the environment is a little different in my district. My district is very blue collar, and for some people, those jobs were their livelihood. So for me, as I said, being the daughter of a union worker, I give my personal experience about, yes, my daddy was a union worker, but it was at a chemical plant. And in hindsight, if we had been more forward thinking back then and talked about the clean energy jobs, it could have been a win-win. It could have been a win for the environment as well as for the workers' livelihoods. So for me, when I speak about the environment, I speak, like I said, in terms of my own personal experience. And here in my district, Columbia Gas, which is also under the name TC Energy, they are expanding a natural gas pipeline. And the natural gas pipeline goes directly through my district. I mean, touches 3 out of the 4 localities in order to provide more natural gas supply to the Hampton Roads area. There's no increase in supply to my district, but all of the work and all of the emissions is in my district. And I've noticed there is a keen awareness in the city of Petersburg, because that is the locality that will be most impacted environmentally by this pipeline expansion. So people have been coining us as the sacrifice city, because it is often those localities that have the lowest income or the lowest education level that are usually the target for these types of projects. And I make sure that when I'm on doors, I let people know, no matter what your economic status, no matter what your education level, everyone deserves to breathe clean air and to live with safe drinking water and a safe buildings. Because I also have an issue in our public school system where we have school buildings that should not be operational, to be honest. But because of the lack of funding, there are kids that are, learning in trailers because the actual school building itself is too unsafe to learn in. So again, the environmental issue is very personal for the voters in my district, because they can actually connect it to their child, to their spouse, to their loved one who is experiencing the direct effects of a lack of investment in my district. In terms of abortion, and just to tell you, my House district is also in Senate District 13, which is the Senate district that was LaSharice Aird versus Joe Morrissey. So the topic of abortion, I saw someone's eyes roll. Yes, the topic of abortion has been very prominent in the primary. And people, to put it plainly, people in my district just don't want government, don't want politicians involved in that decision. It really is it's such a simple conversation in my district, because these are hardworking people who don't want politicians involved in a lot of their decisions, especially this one. So for me, continuing to express how important it is to me to fight for a woman's right to choose, making sure that everyone knows that, yes, there was a time when we thought this could never happen. I know lots of voters who thought we would never get to this point where we would actually be discussing whether or not we will keep our right to choose. I'm 40 years old, so I never remember a time in my life when I didn't have this right. So to think that, children and grandchildren may not, it's just unfathomable. But again, in my district, people are, admittedly, I will say this, people are not as open to talk about it first, but once you bring it up, they're willing to have the conversation. And it's important for me to stress that to you all, because as a rural Democrat, it is a more nuanced conversation for me in my district, but it's a conversation that I'm ready to have. It's a conversation that I'm willing to have on the doors. And I've had conversations where the voter never said the word abortion. I knew what they were talking about. They knew what I was talking about, but they were uncomfortable saying the word. And I know that is not ideal, but I also know that I have to meet people where they are right now. So for me right now, continuing to have that rapport, continuing to have that dialogue is, for me, the first step in getting my majority rural district to be more comfortable having that conversation. And if it takes a rural Democrat to start that conversation, then I'm all for it. I'm all for it.
That's so great. And lots of love coming through the chat. Time for one more question, and I'm going to kind of fold them all into one sort of basket, which is, to what extent do you think the sort of Biden-Trump sort of national picture is impacting your race? One person was asking, do people have a sense of how the Biden administration policies are generating economic benefits to them in the district? And is MAGA having a role in your race? So maybe Susanna, you want to talk to that, and then Kim, we'll end on Kim.
Yeah, I will say this. It's so interesting to me looking at how these narratives get shaped. And it's a particular topic that I really want to delve into more. I will say this. I am fully aware of our economy and that we are on the upswing and we are doing well, and Bidenomics, or however you say it, is doing well, but most voters in the district are not. People aren't paying that close of attention. So there's still this narrative going on that the economy is in the toilet, and there is still the narrative that it is Biden's fault. And so trying to really educate people and voters about that in particular is it's a big task. It is turned out to be a big task. One thing that I am trying to do is use real concrete examples. I know Kim was talking about kitchen table issues a lot. I was the lead nurse practitioner for the VCU Division of Geriatrics for the better part of a decade. And during that time, I primarily saw patients in their homes and often sat at their kitchen tables, and am keenly aware of the issues that impact people on a daily basis. And so really trying to talk to them about that. I talk a lot about medication affordability and accessibility, and how our economy is playing a role in that and how that impacts them, especially when it comes to health. And these are, talking to persuasion voters. And so that seems to get through a bit to them. But yes, so no, I hate to say it, but I cannot tell a lie. The narrative in my district still is that the economy's in the toilet, and it is because of Biden.
Yeah.
So, but Kim and I's districts are very different. So I'm the suburbs of Richmond. I'm the western suburbs of Richmond. I would say it's a lot of middle and middle upper class families. And so they are people that vote with their wallet a lot of the time. And so really trying to get them to understand that is a huge priority of mine.
Great.
Yeah.
Great. Kim?
Yeah, and thank you, Susanna, for mentioning that, because yes, our districts are very different demographically. But interestingly, I also have a challenge when I have that conversation on doors, because there are lots of voters who still believe that the economy is still in a downturn. And what I do personally, because I'm an accountant professionally, so what I do is take my personal expertise as an accountant and I use it to legitimize the talking points, basically. So I let them know, not only is the economy on the upswing, but if it wasn't, I know I'm an accountant, so when I have that conversation on doors, I try to make the talking points personal so that they know that this isn't just something that I'm, reading from a script or something that someone told me to say. This is actually because of what I do professionally. I know this to be true. I'm not just telling you something that I want you to believe. I'm actually telling you facts. And during the primary, this very similar type of question came up during one of our Meet the Candidate forums. And I actually went on record, and it's out there, in the newspaper, where I was criticizing the governor. And I was criticizing the governor because of how he was repackaging federal programs and federal funding and federal aid that was already coming to the district. And the fact that he was repackaging it and making it appear as though it was his own doing, I called him out on it. And if you Google the Progress Index, which is our local newspaper down here, there's an article somewhere back in May where I spoke to that, because voters deserve to know who is looking out for their best interest. And it is not always the first entity to come out with a press release. Oftentimes, as Democrats, we do the work, but we're not as good at bragging. We have a hard time sometimes bragging on our efforts. And I think it's important not to be braggadocious, but it is important for my voters in my district to understand who is looking out for you. And in my district, that is absolutely Democrats, hands down. As I said, I have a locality where the overwhelming majority of my Democratic votes are in the city of Petersburg. And as I said, the median household income is $43,000. So I know there are people who are benefiting from the very types of services and programs that Democrats are fighting so hard for. But when you have a Glenn Youngkin who comes up with this, 6 foot, however tall body and makes you think that he's the one that did it, we have to be strategic in how we push back, because we don't want to look angry, we don't want to look bitter, but at the same time, we want to be informative. So it's my goal on every door to be informative so that the voter knows what's being done and who's doing it on their behalf.
That's great. Well, thank you for both for doing that work and for coming today. Let's all give them a round of virtual applause. And then I am going to hand the mic over to John Medaglia, who's going to shift gears a little bit. So thanks again to our guests. And John, you're on.
Okay, thanks, Aaron. Yes, so we will switch gears a little bit. I have the fortunate task of reporting on 31st Street's most recent letter writing partnership with Working America. Working America is an arm of the AFL-CIO that reaches out to non-college educated, non-union voters to urge them to support progressive causes and candidates. In this project, our 49 amazing volunteers sent letters to Ohio voters urging them to vote no, a big no, on a Republican-led ballot initiative in a special election on August 8. This initiative, called Issue 1, because it's the only issue on the ballot, would make it much harder to pass citizen-initiated amendments to the state's constitution by raising the voting threshold from a simple majority to 60%, and by making the initiative process much more difficult. The Republicans' aim is to prevent Ohioans from approving in this coming November a constitutional amendment that would protect reproductive rights. Republicans thought they'd sneak Issue 1 by in an August election that no one would notice, but many grassroots groups coast to coast have mounted a massive campaign to alert Ohio voters to this skullduggery and the stakes of this election. 31st Street set a goal of sending 3,100 letters to Ohio voters, a huge effort given the short time before the August election. So I'm happy to report that our volunteers have exceeded our goal. We will reach 4,000 letters by Tuesday. So here's a big thank you to our volunteers for their work to protect reproductive rights and democracy in Ohio. And it looks like our efforts will succeed. A new poll shows 57% of likely voters opposed to Issue 1 versus 26% in favor, so more than 2 to 1. Now, since the deadline for mailing these letters is the day after tomorrow, we're not asking for new volunteers, but Working America is planning future letter campaigns, so we will keep you posted on these new opportunities. And now I'd like to turn it over to Joanne Harris, who's going to talk about Virginia. Thanks.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, good. My name is Joanne Harris. I am 31st Street's co-canvasser, canvas coordinator, along with George Hastings. And I am here to ask all of you to please come canvas with us. I'm feeling the passion from all of our speakers today. I hope you are too. We heard frequent references to how much time they spend out there canvassing, how many conversations they have on doors, and that's because it is so incredibly effective. So if any of you is inclined to come canvass with us, please do it. If you are an experienced canvasser, of course we want you. If you are outgoing and persuasive, we want you. If you have never canvassed, we want you. If you've ever wondered about canvassing, but you're not quite sure if it's for you, we want you. And this is because we will train you, we will support you, and we will instill confidence in you. It's that important. You heard Susanna Gibson make reference to a race that was won by just 79 votes. So think about it. If we have 20 canvassers and each of them can persuade just 4 people, which after a day of canvassing may not feel like a lot, but that can make a tremendous difference. So we're hoping that you will join us. We've got a canvass planned on Saturday, August 5th in Leesburg, Virginia, so not too far from us. It's for Russet Perry, who's running for State Senate, District 31. And then beginning on August 26th, we are going to lead canvasses every single Saturday through Election Day. George and I send out a newsletter. For those of you who are members of 31st Street, we send out a voter outreach newsletter once a week that will have the details of all of our canvasses. So I'm urging all of you to please sign up and come canvass with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanne. That was great. Thank you, John, for that inspiring message about the Ohio effort. And I believe we are now at the end of our regularly scheduled programming, but several of us will be sticking around for informal Q&A if anybody has some questions. Anne wants to know about phone calls to Ohio in the next 2 weeks. Is anyone working on that effort? And speak to that? It's a good question.
We're not working on that, but there are other groups that are doing it. I don't know which they are, but I'm sure it's easy to find out. Just a simple simple Google search. But there are lots of, I guess the bottom line is there are lots of groups, nationwide, coast to coast, who are doing work on behalf of Ohio. The Republicans thought they'd sneak it by, but they're sorely mistaken.
And John, you have some love in the chat. They appreciate your use of the term skullduggery.
It seemed very appropriate.
Great. So anyone who has to log off, feel free to disperse. But if you want to hang around for a little bit, we are happy to keep the Zoom open for a little while. Anne, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, Swing Left and Swing Blue Alliance both making phone calls. Other groups are too, but those are the 2 I know off the top of my head.
Great. So if people go to the Swing Left website and also get in touch with Swing Blue Alliance, they can find out how to do that. That's great.
I think actually George is planning to put that in the next newsletter, that very same thing.
Oh, good. Good. Awesome. Victoria, you have your hand up.
Hi, I just wanted to clarify that the canvassing opportunity on August 5th is for a specific candidate. It's not a get out the vote, voter registration, something more general. It's for a specific candidate. That's right.
Joanne, is that correct? I believe it is.
Yes, that's correct. It is for Russet Perry, who's running for State Senate.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
Good. Anyone else?
I think it's great that people want to hang around for whatever they might pick up.
There's lots of pearls of wisdom floating around.
So Aaron, I'd just like to say that those are 2 of the more impressive legislature candidates that we've had on. Particularly in terms of really knowing their district and knowing how to frame issues for their particular voters and knowing what their voters care about. I think, first of all, I want to thank Jim for selecting them, but I was just super impressed with both of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're both very charismatic. And
So I don't know if people notice we raised $11,625. So we have less than 10,000 now to go.
wow. It's amazing.